It was a bright Monday morning, and the busy Citibank was filled with people rushing in and out. At the front desk stood Mr. Andrew Parker, a tall bank teller with neatly combed hair and sharp glasses. He was always serious and followed the rules strictly. A woman named Mrs. Jasmine Carter walked into the bank. She was dressed in a simple but elegant navy blue dress and carried a leather handbag. Jasmine had a warm smile on her face as she approached Andrew's counter. "Good morning, sir," she said politely. "I would like to make a transaction, please." Andrew looked at her from head to toe and raised an eyebrow. "Do you have an account with us?" he asked coldly. "Yes, I do," Jasmine replied, still smiling. Andrew sighed loudly. "Ma'am, I'm going to need some ID." Jasmine handed over her driver's license and bank card, but instead of processing her request, Andrew frowned and glanced at her ID again. Then he shook his head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but something doesn't seem right here. Are you sure this account belongs to you?" he asked with suspicion in his voice. Jasmine's smile faded slightly. "Yes, I'm sure," she said firmly. "Is there a problem?" Andrew crossed his arms and leaned back. "I think you might be mistaken, ma'am. Maybe you should go check with another branch." His voice was sharp now. People in the bank started to stare, and Jasmine felt her cheeks flush. She took a deep breath and said calmly, "Can I please speak to the bank manager?" Andrew smirked. "Our manager is very busy. He doesn't have time for everyone who walks in off the street." Just then, the large glass doors of the bank swung open, and a tall man in a suit walked in. It was Mr. Thomas Green, the bank manager. He noticed Jasmine standing at the counter, and his eyes widened. "Mrs. Carter!" Mr. Green exclaimed, walking over quickly. "I'm so sorry for the delay. Have you been helped yet?" Andrew's face turned pale as he watched his manager shake Jasmine's hand with respect. "Actually, no," Jasmine said, turning to Andrew with a serious look. "This gentleman seems to believe I don't belong here." Andrew froze, his mouth slightly open. Mr. Green frowned at Andrew and then turned back to Jasmine. "Mrs. Carter," he said with a smile, "would you like to come to my office? After all, as the new owner of this branch, you deserve only the best service." Andrew's eyes nearly popped out of his head. "Owner?" he stammered. Jasmine nodded calmly, her smile returning. "Yes, Mr. Parker. I am the new owner of Citibank's main branch, and I think we need to have a little chat about customer service." The entire bank fell silent as everyone stared at Andrew, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. Mr. Green guided Jasmine toward his office, but she paused and turned back to Andrew. "Mr. Parker, please join us in the office," she said firmly. Andrew gulped, his face flushed with embarrassment. Slowly, he stepped out from behind the counter and followed them into the manager's office. Inside, the office was spacious and filled with dark wooden furniture. A large window overlooked the bustling city streets below. Mr. Green gestured for Jasmine to take the seat of honor behind the desk, and Andrew awkwardly sat in a chair across from her. "Mr. Parker," Jasmine began, her voice calm but firm, "I believe you owe me an explanation." Andrew shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I didn't realize who you were, ma'am. I thought, I thought. You thought I didn't belong here." Jasmine finished his sentence for him. "Tell me, Mr. Parker, do you treat all your customers this way, or was there something specific about me that made you suspicious?" Andrew's eyes darted to the floor. "I didn't mean any harm, ma'am. I was just trying to follow procedures." Jasmine leaned back in the chair and folded her hands on the desk. "Following procedures is one thing, Mr. Parker. Disrespecting a customer based on assumptions is another." Mr. Green cleared his throat. "Mrs. Carter, I assure you that we will address this matter appropriately. Andrew will undergo further customer service training, and we will ensure this does not happen again." Jasmine nodded. "That would be a good start, Mr. Green, but I want more than just promises. I want to see real change in how customers are treated in this branch. Every person who walks through those doors deserves respect, no matter how they look or dress." Andrew nodded quickly. "Yes, ma'am, I understand. I'm truly sorry for how I treated you." Jasmine gave him a small smile. "Apology accepted, Mr. Parker, but actions speak louder than words. I hope you'll remember this conversation." The room fell silent for a moment, and then Jasmine stood up. "Now, let's get back to business, shall we?" she said with a confident smile. Mr. Green handed Jasmine a file. Here are the documents for the branch review you requested, Mrs. Carter. Would you like me to schedule a meeting with the staff for tomorrow? Jasmine nodded. Yes, please. I want everyone present. We'll set new standards for this branch. Andrew stood up and gave a small bow. Thank you for your kindness, Mrs. Carter. I promise to do better. Jasmine smiled softly. See that you do, Mr. Parker. Meanwhile, outside the office, word of the situation spread among the bank staff. Employees whispered to each other, glancing nervously toward the manager's office door. Jasmine noticed this through the office window. Mr. Green, she said, I think it's time we spoke to the entire staff today, not tomorrow. Let's address this now. Mr. Green nodded in agreement. I'll gather everyone in the conference room right away, Mrs. Carter. The staff began assembling in the conference room, their faces filled with curiosity and nervousness. Jasmine took a deep breath, preparing to address them. The conference room fell silent as Jasmine stepped forward. Good afternoon, everyone, she began confidently. Good afternoon, everyone, Jasmine began confidently, her voice strong and clear. I'm sure you've all heard by now what happened earlier today. I want to address it directly, and I want to make it clear that this will not be tolerated again under any circumstances. The room was silent, every eye fixed on her. The tension in the air was thick, and even Andrew, who had just entered and stood at the back of the room, seemed to shrink under her gaze. Jasmine paused for a moment, allowing her words to sink in. Respect is the foundation of good customer service. Without it, we lose the trust of those who rely on us. This is not just about following procedures. It's about treating every person with the dignity they deserve. And that starts with the person standing in front of you. She turned to look at Andrew, who stood with his hands clasped in front of him. Mr. Parker, she continued, I understand that you were just following what you believed to be the right procedures. But I want to remind you, and all of you, that assumptions based on appearance or preconceived notions have no place here. This is a place where everyone should feel valued and respected. Andrew nodded slowly, his face still flushed with embarrassment. Now, Jasmine said, shifting her attention back to the rest of the room, I trust that this serves as a wake-up call for all of you. If you ever find yourself questioning whether you are treating a customer fairly, ask yourself this simple question: how would I want to be treated? The staff exchanged uneasy glances. Jasmine's eyes scanned the room, making sure she had their full attention. I will not tolerate any further disrespect of our customers, she said firmly. Each of you will undergo additional training on customer service and inclusion. We are not just a bank, we are a community, and that community deserves the very best from us at all times. She let the gravity of her words hang in the air for a moment before continuing. In addition, I will be implementing regular check-ins with each department to ensure that we're upholding these standards. I expect nothing less than the best from all of you. The staff nodded, some more confidently than others, but there was a sense of resolve in the room now. Jasmine's leadership was undeniable. Andrew, standing at the back, took a deep breath and stepped forward. Mrs. Carter, I want to assure you that I'll do better. I won't let this happen again. Jasmine gave him a small, reassuring smile. I'm glad to hear that, Mr. Parker. I believe you can do better. But remember, actions speak louder than words. I'll be watching, and I expect to see change. Yes, ma'am, Andrew replied, his voice quiet but determined. Jasmine turned back to the group. I know this might be uncomfortable, but discomfort is sometimes the first step toward growth. I believe we can turn this experience into something positive for all of us. Let's work together to build an environment of respect and understanding, one that will make our customers feel welcome every time they walk through these doors. With that, she looked around the room, meeting the eyes of each staff member, her presence commanding respect. That's all for today. Mr. Green, please schedule the next training session, and I'll be reviewing everyone's progress personally. Let's make sure this is the last time we ever have this conversation. Mr. Green nodded, his face serious. I'll take care of it, Mrs. Carter. As the staff began to file out of the room, there was a noticeable shift in the atmosphere. The once tense air now felt lighter, filled with a new sense of purpose. Jasmine had made it clear that things would be different, and there was no room for complacency. Andrew lingered in the doorway, hesitant to leave. Jasmine caught his eye and nodded toward him. "Mr. Parker, I'd like to have a word with you before you go." He nodded nervously and stepped back into the conference room. As the others left, Jasmine turned to him. "I appreciate your willingness to learn from this experience, Andrew," she said, her voice softening slightly. "But remember, leadership starts with us. We set the example for everyone else. How we treat others, how we listen, and how we act. Those things matter." Andrew took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her words. "I understand, Mrs. Carter. I'll work harder to set a better example." Jasmine smiled. "I believe you will. You have the potential to be an excellent part of this team, but it starts with respect. Always." With that, she turned and walked out of the conference room, leaving Andrew to reflect on the lessons of the day. As he made his way back to his desk, he felt a renewed sense of responsibility. Today had been a wake-up call for everyone, and he was determined to make sure he never repeated the mistakes of the past. But Jasmine wasn't done yet. As she headed back to her office, she thought about the changes that still needed to be made. The transformation of this branch wouldn't happen overnight. But with the right leadership and commitment from her team, she was confident that Citibank would be a place where every customer, regardless of appearance or status, would always feel welcome and respected, and she would see to it personally. As the day wore on, Jasmine worked tirelessly, reviewing documents, meeting with department heads, and strategizing the changes that needed to be implemented. Her focus was unwavering, but she knew the real challenge lay ahead, transforming the culture at Citibank into one where respect, fairness, and inclusion weren't just policies, but values deeply ingrained in every staff member's approach to their work. The following week, the first round of customer service training took place. Andrew, along with the rest of the team, sat through the sessions, learning not just about the technical aspects of their jobs, but about the importance of empathy, understanding, and how to recognize and challenge their own biases. The training was eye-opening for many, and by the end of the day, the staff seemed more united in their goal of providing better service to every customer who walked through the door. Jasmine made it a point to walk the floor frequently, checking in with customers and employees alike. Slowly but surely, a change began to take place. The staff became more attentive, more personable, and more willing to go the extra mile to ensure customers felt valued. It wasn't just about transactions anymore. It was about relationships. Months later, Citibank had a noticeable transformation. The customers, who had once felt the brunt of judgment or neglect, began to return, appreciating the more personal, respectful service they now received. Word of the bank's new customer-first culture spread, and with it came an increase in business and customer loyalty. Andrew, too, had grown. He had taken to heart the lessons Jasmine had imparted, and his interactions with customers improved dramatically. He was no longer just the teller who followed the rules. He was the teller who made people feel heard and respected. And as for Jasmine, she couldn't have been prouder of the change she had instigated. One afternoon, as Jasmine walked through the bank, she saw Andrew helping a nervous elderly customer with a complicated transaction. He was speaking gently and offering reassurance, and the woman seemed much more at ease. Jasmine smiled, watching him in action. She knew the work wasn't done yet, but it was clear that the culture she had worked so hard to change had already taken root. As the months turned to years, the transformation of Citibank became a case study in customer service excellence. And Jasmine, the woman who had once been dismissed with suspicion, became known as the leader who had turned the bank around, reminding everyone that respect, not appearances, should be the foundation of any business. Lesson: respect is the cornerstone of any successful relationship, whether personal or professional. It is not the outward appearance or the assumptions we make about others that matter, but the way we treat them. Treat everyone with dignity and kindness, for it is through respect that trust and meaningful connections are built. Never underestimate the power of empathy and understanding, and always be willing to change and grow for the better.